true personal growth ultimately will lead to fulfillment. And it's my intention with these podcasts to connect more deeply with you. Thank you for joining me and Corbin and my guests, and welcome to this episode. Well, it's been a slightly longer break than originally intended, but here I am back again as promised, and with a new name. So the first 90 episodes of this podcast began life as the Mind-Body-Spirit Connection. So if you find yourself listening to any of those episodes, don't be surprised or imagine that you've switched podcasts. And now, starting with a very warm welcome to one and all, that is, returning listeners and new ones. I'll just recap on the reasons for the name change, because you might be curious about why I would want to take such a step. Well, the fact is that I fell out of love with the Mind, Body, Spirit title remarkably soon after launching the podcast. Pretty well as soon as I recognised that it screams new age to a great many people. What's wrong with that, you may well ask? Well, past listeners might recall that I've referred to my reservations in no less than 3 previous podcasts, and I even surprised myself to see that I'd already recognised those seeds of doubt as early as the 20th of May 2022. In the episode that I entitled Critical Thinking and Making Connections. The other 2 relevant podcasts are 5th of May 2023, that was a year later, entitled One Connection Too Many, and then there's one in the middle, 23rd of September 2022, entitled What Does New Age Philosophy Mean to You? So all the detail can be found in those podcasts if you are inclined to look into it. But to summarise, I spent quite a bit of time looking into the history of this New Age religion, including Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society origins of New Age. This was prompted by, well, almost a challenge from one of my business acquaintances who had said, well, I believe in God, so no one is going to tell me any different. Well, I was aware that Mind, Body, Spirit shouts New Age to possibly a large chunk of society, but I had minimal knowledge of this, well, relatively new religion, so I thought I had better research it, and I began doing so. Very quickly, I grew to feel that I would prefer to disassociate myself from the name that I'd carefully chosen for the podcast, and incidentally for my book, which was published round about the same time. That's the Mind, Body, Spirit Mentor. And yet, Mind, Body, Spirit Connection covers exactly what I'm all about. So just what was the answer? Well, I believe there's also a very great number of people who are blissfully unaware of what New Age really is and its dark underbelly and satanic practices. So I took my time as I considered numerous options for the new title. Then I took a break from podcasting because life was getting super hectic by the second half of last year. And in fact, the break ended up being an ideal time to select a new name and relaunch. So, why quantum growth and connection? Well, to start with, you'll notice that I've retained the word connection, and that's really important to me. I love the quote from Steve Jobs' Stanford commencement address, where he says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, your destiny, life, karma, whatever. because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference. I believe nothing happens in isolation. Everything is connected. We are all connected. The butterfly effect is real, and one person vibrating at a really high frequency genuinely will affect thousands, sometimes millions of others, and not just those in that person's immediate vicinity. Most of us, as humans, are fully aware of our physical bodies, but not of the energy fields that surround each one of us. These fields are referred to as our subtle bodies, our toric fields or energy bodies. We're trained when very young that we have 5 senses: sight, touch, taste, smell and hearing. And one of my trainers opines that we have 10 senses because each of those 5 has a partner in our internal world. We can imagine sound, even taste, for example. Think of biting into a big juicy lemon. In other words, imagination involves all of the 5 senses and not just vision. And so we refer to 5-sense reality. But what about ESP? Extrasensory perception, or that elusive 6th sense, which is outside of 5-sense reality. And now we're moving into those fascinating realms that are less well understood. The power of the subconscious mind, the acknowledgement of gut feelings or hunches, and the perception of atmosphere in a room, even without a word being said. You could cut the atmosphere with a knife, for example. Why? Well, we can pick up hostility, fear, excitement, enthusiasm, all sorts of emotions. And some of us are super sensitive to these vibrations, whereas others maintain that they seldom notice. Largely, it's the state of our energy bodies that explains these differences in perception. It's a huge subject, and there is no question that all of our fields overlap, and this is why and how we are all connected. Is it only people that have energy fields? Do animals have them? Well, of course. And likewise, insects, plant, anything that's alive and apparent inert bodies, such as rocks, even have these fields. Or so we're now learning. There are no coincidences either. Start considering these events as synchronicities and notice how often they show up for you. They are signs that God, or the universe, is working with you. Do you see life as something that happens to you? No, it's happening for you. It can be tough to appreciate this at times, especially when numerous challenges line up one after the other, and sometimes several at the same time. But challenges are opportunities for growth, and in this life we are supposed to grow. In nature, everything is either growing or dying. Benjamin Franklin, apparently it was him, who said, "The majority of young men die at 25, but get buried 50 years later." It was supposed to be a reminder to make the most of your life and grasp opportunities as and when they show up. Life wasn't very comfortable in those days, and few of them would have got stuck in the comfort zone, which is one of the liabilities of the 21st century. There is no growth inside the comfort zone. Back to those challenges you might be juggling with. Sometimes it's very hard to see the positive in a bad situation, particularly while it's happening and you're feeling raw and bruised. However, when you look back after everything has calmed down, maybe several years later, it can often be a great deal easier to see why the thing happened the way it did, and to assess rationally how well you performed in that particular test. Because at school, we learn the lessons and then we take the tests. But life just throws the tests at us. And it's from the tests that we learn the lessons. And then from the lessons, we grow. You might have noticed that it can happen that the same test seems to keep showing up for you. There will be a reason for that. You have to keep taking the test until you pass, and then you move on. And growth is about more than just taking tests. Most coaches and mentors will recommend some kind of daily practice. Jack Canfield calls it the power hour. Robin Sharma recommends getting up at 5 a.m. daily, but that's not necessary if you aren't a morning person. But this hour can be spent developing yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually. For example, you could do 20 minutes of exercise and 20 minutes of reading or journaling and 20 minutes of meditation. You get the picture. A simple, short, daily practice can develop huge change by the end of a year if you do it consistently. And now, let's talk about quantum. You could call this a buzzword of the 21st century, and many people, I notice, are using it interchangeably with spirituality. But look in a standard dictionary, particularly an older printed one, and you might simply see the word amount from the Latin translation. And words like quantity and quantifiable clearly link back to this Latin translation. It seems that for my whole life, I've known this phrase quantum leap. From this, I had concluded that quantum meant enormous, and then, whether at school or uni, I forget which, I encountered quantum mechanics. It's that branch of physics devoted to the study of the tiniest particles of matter, atoms, protons, electrons, and so forth. So how does that reconcile with enormous? I decided that it must have something to do with the enormous amount of energy required for an electron to move from one orbit to another. See, this is my left brain in operation. It seems that the modern definition of quantum is the smallest discrete unit of a phenomenon. Therefore, a quantum of light would be a photon, a quantum of electricity is an electron, and so on. But how does this relate to the quantum field and quantum computing? Well, quantum theory has been described as possibly the most successful scientific theory of all time, because it allows us to predict experimental results with stunning accuracy. It's the fastest way to predictable outcomes. Read more about it and you're into string theory and pretty incomprehensible dimensions as you study tiny, tiny particles. And I'll stop right there with the science. Really, this is about how the universe works, and that is what interests me. The quantum field is also referred to as the unified field, the Akashic field, the matrix, the divine matrix, just the field, or just the quantum. It's huge, it's beyond comprehension, fascinating, and capable of making things happen at great speed. This is what quantum computers do, and they use qubits instead of the ordinary bits that work on binary theorem. Manifesting is the word that we use for making things happen or influencing reality. Such things might also be called miracles, and it has been said for many years that miracles are just physics for which we haven't yet found the equation. See why I chose the word quantum? You can set yourself up to win at the game of life. Become familiar with the laws of the universe. You have infinite potential. You can influence reality. Quantum growth and connection explores success strategies, power principles, relationship rescue, and the quantum field.